All right, one popular question we get, which we'll go over this morning, is how to select every n number of rows of data. This is a very popular question if you work in the financial industry or you do any financial like analysis, anything in finance. Chemicals, somewhat, not as common in chemicals, but if you're in the world of finance, for sure. Okay, so we have a table, and our table is, I believe, value dates. And keep in mind that this is just for testing purposes. This is not a production environment here. So we have 500,000 rows of basically the date that I believe spans over a couple of minutes. Suppose you're given requirements and someone comes to you and they say, hey, we would like to get every 1,000 rows of data. So you have 500,000 rows and they want to get every 1,000th row and store that. So how would you go about doing that? Now I'm going to use some of the logic that we've used in previous videos. That way I don't introduce anything that's completely brand new. There are, quite frankly, several approaches you could use, but I'm going to use this approach. The first thing, we've gone over row number, so if you are wondering what this does, review the video, get the previous or next value. We discussed row number in that. We're going to order it by BLDT, and then we're going to select BLDT from the table. We're going to select star from every. And again, I would not be doing select star if I was in production, but this is a dev environment, so it's okay. Just stress it out a little bit. All right, so what we've done, we've just added an ID field because the table only had the date field. Okay, so we have 1 through 500,000. If we go all the way down to the end of the table, you'll see that we have 500,000 is the last value in the table. So what we want to do is we want to grab every 1,000 rows of data. So I'm going to first of all demonstrate this with 10. So one of the operators, and I don't believe I've discussed this, that we can use is the modulo operator, and that's how I call it, and it may be called something else. And it involves division, or it involves understanding division. So if I were to say 10 divided by 3, what is the remainder of 10 divided by 3? And you would say, the correct answer is 1, right? So 3 goes into 10 3 times with a remainder of 1. And for those of you who think that mathematics is relative and all that other good stuff, keep in mind that math it's not. People will always say it's a language. It's not a language. It's a problem-solving tool. And what I mean by that is, suppose you had 6 apples and you had 3 very large bags, and I told you I want you to put those 6 apples into an equal amount of those 6 apples into each bag. So you have 3 large bags, and you want to put 6 apples to where each bag will have an equal amount of apples. So you're going to put 2 each. The way that I see a lot of kids learning math nowadays is as if it's a language, right? Memorize your multiplication tables, memorize your division tables. I never had to memorize math, ever. I've never studied for a math test, and I never made less than an A. And it's not because I'm so good at math, it's because it's logical. And all you have to do is understand what you're doing, and you can always solve the problem. And so it's not this language, this arbitrary language where you're memorizing verbs and nouns, and that's English, that's not math. And so anytime you get into a problem, just imagine what you're solving in the real world. So like in division, you have 6 apples, you have 3 containers, you need to put an equal amount of apples in each container. There's only one way you can do that, you put 2 in each. All right, and the same thing here is like when you get into the problem, understand what's going on, and then you don't have to memorize something. Anytime I see people trying to memorize something in math, I'm like, why? It's logical. So the modulo operator works kind of similarly in terms of it's very similar to division. So we have the ID field. So notice how this is always a number. And what we want to do is we want to select, in the first example, we're going to do every 10 values, where the ID is going to be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. So in a division problem, how can we express that from a division perspective? Well, we can say where the number divided by 10 equals, or where the number divided by 10 has a remainder of 0, right? And that's how modulo works. I say where this field that has the number field, modulo 10, has a remainder of 0. So see what we've expressed, and let's look at what our answer is. It goes 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and so on. And just to kind of prove that, and we can look at something else, let's suppose we wanted to look at every odd value. So we would say, how are we going to express that in a division problem? Every odd value. So 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. I'm not good at going every odd value when it gets higher and higher. So if we say where the ID, where the number field, divided by 2 is going to be a remainder of what? 1, right? I mean, in other words, an odd value is going to always have a remainder of 1 if it's divided by 2. And you'll see 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. Okay, and again, the same thing. We could do divided by 2 with a remainder of 0, and you'll see it's going to be every even value. So, going back to our requirements from our client, they want every 1,000 values. So we're going to start at 1,000, and we're going to go and get every 1,000 values. So we take the number field, and we put the modulo operator, 1,000, and we want a remainder of 0. And you will see it will grab 10,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, etc. And you'll also notice that, of course, 500,000 rows of data becomes 500. And that's kind of like using a mathematical proof if you want. If you have 500,000 rows of data, you're grabbing every 1,000 rows. You can divide 500,000 by 1,000, and how many values are you supposed to end up with? And this is kind of like, in math they talk about using a check. Always check your answer. This is kind of another check that you've got the right answer. So you can use the modulo operator to grab every so many values. If you have a table where you don't have numbers, then you can always use a common table expression. And in this case, notice that's why I used date. We didn't actually have numbers. We created numbers with row number, and then we went ahead and used that row number here in our where clause to grab every nth value. And so that's a way in which you can get every other value or every n values from a table. And like I said, I think you'll find that this is used most in the financial industry, and second would be the chemical industry.